Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you on a Thursday. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and we are off and running. We're almost through the bye week. I know at first it felt like we needed it. Now I'm ready to talk some football. And we'll see where we go with that. Plenty of football on the docket today. We'll spend time with Brandon Vogel from HailVarsity.com and magazine. Just a reminder, we are going to be at the Hail Varsity Club in La Vista tomorrow from 4 to 6. Myself, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark will be chained to a studio, bless his heart. So we'll be on the road. If you're heading out for prep football Friday night in the Metro, come see us before you make your way out, 4 to 6, and that is between Cabela's and Embassy Suites in La Vista, just off Giles. So come see us at the Hail Varsity Club tomorrow. Love the road show Fridays as we hunker down. Vogue's with us. He was going to do some reconnaissance this weekend on coastal Carolina. I do believe an audible was called on that, but nonetheless, we'll check in with Vogues. You can stream us and find the podcast, as always, on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and also the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. So Brandon Vogel coming up in hour 2. Gary Barnett, see what he thinks of some more of the coaching names, and also what's in front of Mickey Joseph. We have some more emails to get to and some tweets regarding, because Elijah, that's been the most smoke this week. Okay, you move on from Oklahoma. We spend a little bit of time on, okay, what's a win total look like? But more and more names, more and more things are floated out there. We'll dive into what Trev had to say about the stadium, about the media rights deal, and what Trev has to say about things that are floating out there on Twitter. Bill Bender, Sporting News. He'll talk Nebraska with us in hour 2 after Coach Barnett. And then from VSiN Sports Network, Danny Burke with us. Some NFL picks, some college thoughts this weekend. Can dial us up at 466-3776 or 1-800-825-5865. Can email Chris at HailVarsity.com. Find and follow us. Do so on Twitter at Schmidt_radio. Chris Schmidt, that's me, at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel. And as always, at HVarsity Radio to follow along with the show and follow along with Hail Varsity. That's the housekeeping. If we were going to put together a list of horses in this coaching race, what number are you up to right now as a Nebraska fan? Elijah, what number are you up to as somebody that gets to do this for a living? I'm up to about eight names right now. And there's some, depending on the day, I can kind of sway in and out with. I still want to see Mickey do well. I want to see Mickey put a run together if I'm a Nebraska fan. And quite honestly, I mean, Mickey's going to be judged not necessarily on Oklahoma. That could have gone big in his favor had he shocked the world. But that was a big ask with the week that was.
There was nothing to lose from Mickey Joseph in that performance.
Right. And the first 5 minutes, you felt good, and now you turn your attention to Indiana. But games right now, as you look at Nebraska's schedule, you've got Indiana, you've got Illinois, you have Rutgers, right? Those are 3 that are probably going to be one-score games or coin flips. The kids need to get coached up, and that's Mickey and Bill's plan. But there is new and there is change, so that is delicate. Minnesota's playing really good football right now. They look like the team in the West, unless Wisconsin wakes up, okay? And then we'll see where Iowa is at. Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, those were going to be probably underdog ball games before all this change. And then you have your crossovers, and we mentioned Rutgers. That's a road Friday deal. You have Michigan that looms, that's no good to deal with them in Ann Arbor. So November's a tough stretch. So Mickey's on the list for sure because he's handling business right now. I think things have been diffused enough where Urban Meyer is a long shot, but still on that proverbial list. Bill O'Brien, Matty Campbell, Luke Fickell, Chadwell from Coastal, Leipold from Kansas. How's this name grab you? And it's been mentioned, but it feels like maybe from a Nebraska fan standpoint, it's picking up a little bit more steam. And rewatching that Oklahoma-Nebraska game, a lot was talked about by Joel Klatt on Dave Aranda and Dave Aranda's offense and what Dave Aranda's done at Baylor and all the work Dave Aranda did at LSU. The crossover there with Mickey and Bush. Dave Aranda, when he was at Wisconsin, knows the Big Ten, took all the big linemen that live and breathe in Wisconsin and turned that region into a pretty fierce defense, as Nebraska fans will remember. So I don't want to say a new leader, but a new name that, as this week ends, I think picks up some steam. And I don't know the math on what Aranda's buyout would be because of it being a private school. So we'll talk with Gary Barnett about Baylor. We'll get his take on Aranda. And if that's a spot you want to live, Waco, Texas, the rest of your life. And then for giggles, Matt Rule, right? Because of what he did at Baylor, what he did at Temple. And we're in the process of finding out, Elijah, if he's a college coach or if he's a pro coach. Because a lot of the guys who do time in the NFL are really, really good, but it's a control thing.
Yeah, and I like your analogy that you used earlier of a horse race here with these candidates and where we're at, because I want to get your take on where we'd be at in a horse race if the coaching search was a horse race, because we're probably not even out of turn one yet. Like, where are we at here?
No, the race just started.
I mean, are we still like just getting out of the gates, getting lined up on the fence? I'm terrible horse racing guy.
I think if we go back to where we're at in the season, what happened from Ireland to now, I mean, you're a quarter of the way in. So all the jockeys are on the horses. I think the bell may have rung. And it's going to be fascinating to watch this season. Kansas football sold out for the first time in forever. Mm-hmm. Game day passed over him for Florida, Tennessee. But Leipold is taking on Dick. You have Iowa State and Matty Campbell favored, despite not being ranked, at home this weekend against Baylor, who comes in 17th in the country. They're 1-1. I think Baylor, they got beat by BYU in a thriller, in an overtime
thriller at a hostile crowd out in Provo. So that's something to be factored.
Dude, you couldn't pay me enough to take my college football team to Provo for a night game. No. I mean, I remember the Hurricanes being number one in the country and the best team in college football, going out there and getting drilled by Coy, make that tie. Coy was his brother at Colorado. Ty Detmer, way, way, way before you were born.
Well, like a night game in Provo, like those, I was going to say those kids are amped up on like caffeine and whatnot, but I don't even think they're allowed to have caffeine out there. They're amped up on.
But they're just amped up on
the spirit
good old
of football.
Clean energy. They're good. Yeah, good old clean energy. I mean, here come the Baptists. Let's hammer them. Here come those Baptists. Let's smoke them on the football field. So the race just started, and then 2 weeks from this weekend, you've got Kansas and Iowa State. mean, and I'm not saying it's a game of survivor, but how your team does will play in from a recency standpoint. But Trev's going to look at this thing big picture. Paul is with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Paul, thanks for hanging. Go ahead, bud.
Hey, guys. Everyone's loving this guessing game of who's going to be the next head coach, and I'm thinking we're going to get sick of that guessing game. I know I already am. How about a better one? Who's going to be the defensive coordinator if it's not going to be Bill Bush going forward?
Well, that depends, Paul.
Depends on the outcome of the guessing game.
Depends on who your head coach is going to be.
Exactly.
If it's Mickey, if he wins the job, then Bill will probably get heavy consideration, because what Mickey does leading this team moving forward, and if the defense can get better and not be a 35-point, 500-plus yards a game defense, good for Bill. I mean, that's all up in the air right now, Paul. And the guessing game right now is pretty fascinating with as many coaches on this race list that have been asked about it. We'll get to some of Trev's comments right now. And quoting Trev today, I will say that most of the stuff I've read on Twitter, I don't know if I've seen anything that's accurate, end quote. So Trev's throwing some cold water, as you'd expect and you'd hope, out there. But it's pretty interesting. The other thing, too, when it comes to Twitter, chiming in, you have Troy saying the Kansas-Iowa State coach playing for the NU job. Some have suggested that. Coach Porter chimes in. I hear fans saying we need a coach who can win championships, Elijah. We need to realize we just need to win first. Titles come later. Just start winning. Amen, Coach Porter. That's the other part, is who can get this thing up and going. Mickey's got a chance to do that now. But big picture, if it isn't Mickey, and you pray he's still on staff, and if it isn't Bill Bush's coordinator, you pray he's still on staff, because they're both electric recruiters, who can get Nebraska flipped around? What's the down time, right? That's the other question, because your rebuild was supposed to be ongoing the last 4 years. And what's crazy, I was talking with a former player today, Elijah. Think about Ernest Hausman's situation, okay? Just as case in point to where the program's at right now. At inside backer, Henrich was hurt. You've still got Reimer. You've recruited some inside linebackers. You've taken inside linebackers every recruiting class. And you just grabbed Ernest Hausman, stud out of Columbus, who's played most of his time in high school as an outside backer. You move him inside, you're playing all along, that's fine. But he's seen a hell of a lot of snaps early, and you got to be the brains on top of the brawn to make things work. And he'll continue to grow. I'm not chastising him at all. I think he's a really good ball player. But that's where you're at. Where's your fourth-year guy, walk-on or recruit, that can supplement, that's your second or third teamer? And that's what's been void here the last 3 years. And it's all part of a coaching transition that keeps happening every 4 or 5 years here. But you're seeing it when it comes to development and options. You don't have many options on the offensive line that you felt comfortable with. You've kept running the same dudes out there. Defensive line. We told you who went to the portal last year, and you went back to the portal to supplement because what was supposed to be in that D-line room either left or they're not ready. So it's just this vicious cycle that continues.
And what's kind of fun is seeing these people on Twitter going well, Baylor's got the third-ranked offensive line in college football this year, according to Pro Football Focus, and other people saying, well, look what Matt Campbell's done at Iowa State. And I mean, I think it's way too early to be looking at what Baylor's offensive line is doing at this season. There's so much. It's not like, oh, well, he got himself one good offense line at Baylor, which means he's going to have a great offense line here at Nebraska. College football is so much deeper than that. But one thing to keep in mind as we're into this time of speculation and coaching carousel, and everyone's throwing names out there, is just that. People are throwing names out there because everyone's got their own self-interest in this coaching search. Whether it's Trev Alberts, maybe he's going to throw a name out there or talk to somebody. Maybe it's going to slip out there that I talked to this person because he's trying to keep a cloak and dagger type deal going with another coach he's got dealings with under the table. Or you got a media member down in, say, Texas, as I saw, who said, you know what, Baylor's really worried that Nebraska's going to throw the kitchen sink at Dave Aranda. And maybe they're just doing that because they want to boost their own appeal. They want to boost some followers and give themselves some more credence in Baylor's media cycle. So, like, there's so many just competing self-interests here in this coaching search that makes it very difficult for people like you and me, Schmidt, to sift through and figure out what the hell's actually going on.
Everyone's got to take who should be head coach. You've got Team Mickey, you've got Team Aranda, you got Team Leipold, you got Team Campbell, you've got Team. You sure as hell have allowed Team Urban the last several weeks, and now Urban threw cold water on that yesterday. But the reality remains of a builder, right? It's a builder to come in, and we'll talk to Brandon Vogel about slotting the metaphoric horses here when it comes to coaches. We'll get to more your emails. We'll have some open phones for you as well around 4:40. Gary Barnett coming up in the 5 o'clock hour, and we'll spend time with Bill Bender as well. Hail Varsity with you on a Thursday as we get going into a bye weekend. Hail Varsity Club tomorrow, 4 to 6 for a road show in La Vista. We're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We welcome in managing editor with HailVarsity.com and magazine, Brandon L. Vogel. Vogues is incognito. He's got a little camouflage going. Where are you at? I'm used to you in your football office. Are you Are you hiding out in a zoo? I mean, and that's not. I'm not knocking you. I'm just saying it looks like there's some zoo flavor or painting or mural behind you.
Could be Rainforest Cafe.
True.
Yeah.
No, I'm still at home. Much like Trev Alberts, I'm having to consider a venue change because this younger generation of fan demands things like dinner at 5:30 local time. So here we are. I'm in our dining room. This is a lovely painting by my wife, who is a painting and a drawing instructor and artist.
I was going to say, is that homemade? The painting behind you, it looks wonderful. Junior, let's see Junior again. Is he going to throw stuff at you? Are you in the line of fire?
It's possible. I mean, we're definitely going to hear from him throughout this. He's got he has already eaten an entire sweet potato, which is kind of alarming for a 1.5-year-old. So we'll see how the rest of his plate goes. But
unlike the strike zone, Carson, when he was that age, could throw a strike and get me with all sorts of noodles or SpaghettiOs. Vogues, let's slot the horses. People are either all in with the all right, let's talk coaching. Let's talk coaching candidates, or folks by Thursday are shut up, figure out something else to talk about. I'm still intrigued. You were going to do some recon with Chadwell and Coastal Carolina. You still may. I think as we have seen the race begin and everyone's out of the gate, I think there's been some movement by Aranda. I think Urban was what everyone wanted to bet on as he's drifted back to the pack. And I think holding steady are your candidates from Iowa State, also your candidates from Lawrence. And then there's Mickey still in the race as well. And then you have the O'Briens and Fickles to think about as well. And then we don't know if he'll be a late entrant into the race or not in the Matt Rule. So if you were to give me kind of a pecking order, where are you at right now?
Yeah, so I think you look at Nebraska, and I think what they've lacked and why they've struggled in the Big Ten. And there's a lot to be said for a couple of coaches that are located pretty close to Lincoln right now. Not because being in the Midwest / Great Plains is somewhat unique, but I think both Lance Leipold and Matt Campbell are probably pretty close to would be co-favorites for me at this point, just based on I think they address Nebraska's direct needs, which is you got to be a development program. You got to be a program that punches above your weight. And both of those guys have done that at multiple stops at FBS schools. Leipold also did it at a really, really high level at Wisconsin Whitewater in D3. And when I look at this objectively, I think that's a box Nebraska would probably like to check. My out of nowhere, sort of out of the clouds, long shot to this. And maybe it's not even a long shot. We just don't know where he stands is based on track record and results is probably Chris Peterson. I have no idea if he ever wants to coach football again or not. Chadwell's one of those guys that comes from kind of a more traditional trajectory in this, at least. Oh, the young guy
like
doesn't
that.
like it. But the G5 riser. But I'm intrigued by that, and I'll definitely watch that Coastal Carolina game tonight. And not that one game proves anything, but so I think there's still a lot to be sorted. Aranda is another one where a year ago, when you're talking to people and you're wondering, is Nebraska making a move now? Is it not? Felt like somebody who was pretty happy in Waco. But who knows? It's been an entire year since then.
Well, Brandon, you mentioned Dave Aranda, and I want to go there for just 1 second because it's a guy that doesn't necessarily on its face make a whole lot of sense. He just signed a brand new contract extension this offseason. I think it locks him in Waco until 2029. But a lot of Baylor and Husker fans alike saying that Aranda to Nebraska could be a very real thing. Do you think that's a case of where there's smoke, there's fire? Or is that a case of, a fan throwing a smoke bomb on the field?
Let's get a raise.
Yeah, I honestly think it's too early for there to be any real smoke at this point. Not that I don't think that Trev and the consulting firm and his team are working on things. They definitely are. And I mean, he said again today, the advantage here is we've got some runway. And I agree with that. To the utmost degree. That said, all of these people, presumably, other than a candidate like Peterson or Urban Meyer, is in the middle of a season. And, I was reading back over some Frost stuff from the end of 2017, et cetera. And I think he actually said this in reference to rumors about Florida, which fired Dan Mullen that year, or not Dan Mullen, Jim McElwain. Was it Jim McElwain?
The shark wrestler, yes.
Yep. Fired him weeks before Nebraska announced the change with Mike Riley. And Frost, of course, was rumored for that job. And he was like, it's borderline kind of a crime for me to be even talking about these things. Now, we know there are ways to talk to a head coach without talking to the head coach and distracting them in the middle of a season. But I really think that's where things are at. If you're legitimately interested in somebody, you make it known and you see where it goes. So, is there smoke around Dave Aranda? If there is, I'm not convinced it's all that real at this point.
It's Brandon Vogel with us, HailVarsity.com and magazine at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. Vogues, some of the things laid out by Trev. Still 1,000 seats remain for Nebraska, Indiana. We were just talking horse racing analogy. If you're going to bet money line here, what do you think of the sellout streak's future?
It's going to be tough. I think they'll probably be okay for that Indiana game. But, going forward, I think Nebraska, maybe minus Michigan at this point, has a decent enough shot. I mean, Michigan's a road game, so I guess that doesn't matter. But has a decent enough shot in all of these. That said, nothing we've seen so far makes you feel very confident, or at least makes me feel very confident, that any of these is guaranteed to go great. So a lot of it's going to depend on kind of what Nebraska does in the next couple of weeks. They got another 3-game stretch here where, and 2 of those games are on the road, which are probably your most winnable games of those remaining. And if you can do that, you can build a little momentum here. And, we know Husker fans are going to show up. It's just, we're talking about to what degree. And that's been the case, truthfully, for a while. But I'll give Trev credit on that because he's been willing to address it directly. Mm-hmm. I think, if you're somebody in his position, you'd like to see it continue, but he's not like at all costs are we going to prop this up. And if that happens, I'll personally be sad because I do put some stock in that, even though we know, there's a lot of maneuvering around keeping that streak going to this point. But it'll feel like a little bit of a marker to me if that streak does end up ending.
Well, Brandon, when you look at the rest of the season as a whole, I said on the show yesterday, I think 1-11 is more real of a possibility than 6-6 or maybe even 5-7. Is that me being a pessimist or is that me being a realist? That was kind of our theme for the show yesterday.
Good question. Going into the Oklahoma game, I would have said that's too pessimistic. I still think it's a little bit too pessimistic, but I'm closer to your side. Let's put it that way after that. I mean, and it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that Nebraska didn't come out and compete with Oklahoma for longer. It was just that, it's a big ask and it's a tough ask over these remaining 8 games. I think Nebraska's like true value based on the players they have on the field is higher than losing out essentially. But there's just so much kind of emotion and off the field stuff involved that I'm at a point where I can't rule it out. I mean, I can go out and tally up and here's Nebraska will be favored in these remaining games, probably based on what we think now. And you can add all that up and it probably equates to 5 or 6 wins, but it's just, there's too many unknowns right now for me.
Brandon Vogel is with us, Hail Varsity Radio at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. It's where you follow him, managing editor with HailVarsity.com and magazine, his book with John Cook. Some chirping about John Cook as a defensive coordinator candidate. How would that go? About 90 seconds.
I'd be intrigued. I mean, it'd be. I mean, are we talking about an interim coach? Like, if we've got further staff changes, probably don't want to sacrifice what looks like a pretty promising volleyball season so far. But if we're talking post that, it's coaching's coaching at the end of the day, in my mind. No matter what sport it is, it's about reaching people. It's about building teams. And the amazing thing to me about John Cook is you have all of this success. It seems like it runs itself and you just kind of, fired up each year. It's not like that. Having had in-depth conversations with him for that book, it's every season is a new one. How are you going to reach this group? What do they need specifically? And that's what really elite coaching is in my mind. You got to treat every season like you haven't done anything before. You haven't accomplished anything.
Amen to that. Brandon Vogel and Junior enjoying dinner right now. Thanks for making him available this week for the media.
No problem. Thanks for putting up with him. Update, the turkey meatballs are going okay, but not as well as I'd hoped, considering I made 20 of them and I thought it was good for through the weekend.
Thanks a lot, Vogues.
Chime in 402-466-ESPN or email the show, Chris@HailVarsity.com.
Just try me.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. Hail Varsity Radio on a Thursday, presented by Currency. Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. You got phone lines open here till about 5, 466-3779. 466-3776. Can email the show. We'll get to those in a bit. Chris at HaleVarsity.com. And reminder to you, are you looking to get to an event, a special event? And if so, it's real easy to do with your friends at Red Zone Tickets, RedZoneTickets.com, because they make it real easy for you, Elijah, to get to an event or sell an event. Say you can't go. RedZoneTickets.com will sell seats for you, and it's 100% guaranteed. They've been selling fun since 2001. RedZoneTickets.com. They take care of you with Husker football. They take care of you with Husker volleyball. You want to go see the NFL. I got some friends that are headed out to Donkeyland to see San Francisco and Denver this Sunday night. Chiefs, Green Bay. Listen, they have the access to the NFL. Creighton basketball, Final Four, man. They could be incredible this year. They have that on the docket for you as well. College World Series. What about theater seats or concerts? Dave Matthews in November. RedZoneTickets.com is where you go. They're local. They're from Omaha. And A+ Better Business Bureau rating. And that guarantee is not just smoke. It's backed up. You'll receive authentic tickets and experiences you'll never forget. So cross off that bucket list item and do so today. Create the memories that last a lifetime with RedZoneTickets.com.
Schmitty, tell me really fast before we move on to more important things. What's your bucket list concert? Like if this artist, this band was in Nebraska, you'd pay whatever it takes to get in there.
Oh, I'm going to go see Dave Matthews, Michigan, Saturday.
Yep.
Right? We pray that's a morning game. But I wish I would have splurged for Dave Matthews, Tim Reynolds, acoustic.
Okay.
Radio City Music Hall. Because the acoustic's really cool. Dave will be great, don't get me wrong, but he did about 45 minutes acoustic one time down in Kansas City in Blue Springs, Missouri, where he usually plays down there. And that was fantastic. I would have loved to have seen Tom Petty at Red Rocks before Tom passed. And I think I've seen Guns N' Roses. I've seen the Chili Peppers. I've seen Kiss. All the good stuff. I've seen Zach Brown three times. That's been good. Eric Church a couple of times. That's been fun. At PBA, love what they do. So I've been pretty lucky, to be honest. I guess I'm good. Tom Petty, I can't do anything about. Can't do anything about. So let's talk about Trev Alberts right now. And he laid out some things, him and Ronnie and company, they are working on touching up Memorial Stadium, right? There's chairbacks. There's going to be some renovations going on. Teddy Carter's like, look, it's like fixing an airplane in the air. Totally get it. So when you go chairbacks to that east area, you're going to eliminate some seats. They've got to be strategic and careful, right? Because Trev referenced the boosters of substance take from Bill Byrne many, many decades ago that has still rubbed people the wrong way. There's the grandfather clause you got to consider. But if you shrink the stadium, I'm all right with it. You're still trying to peddle 1,000 seats here for Indiana. You don't beat Indiana, you're going to be trying to peddle 1,000 more. The sellout streak is important. It's a tribute to you, the fan that have been great and endearing and enduring since 1962. You've had a lot to cheer for and recently a lot to cry about because it's just been a tough run when you've seen excellence in good football for such a long time. It's been anything but consistent. And if you want to go do something else on a Saturday, I totally hear you because sometimes it's been unwatchable. And Nebraska's trying to fix that. So Nebraska to me is, and Trev's great, man, that he put out these feelers, that he put out the survey, and he's gonna listen to people. And you need a 2.0 version of your 100-year-old stadium. So party deck, probably some beer at some point. I know it's not in the near future, but at least it's gonna be talked about and likely implemented at PBA for basketball for men's and women's. You don't have to have it. It's just an amenity. You don't really have the infrastructure, but that's part of the work that needs to be done at Memorial Stadium to someday be able to have a scotch or a shot of tequila or an ice cold beer to start your third quarter off, right? I mean, and it's not just about the revenue, it's about the amenities, because what happens? Halftime of Oklahoma, you're getting plowed on the football field, and you had a mad rush like it's a fire drill to get to the Champions Club or your tailgate spot to make the pain stop or have a cold one, right? Things emptied out, and you went to the bar or you went to your tailgate spot or you went to the Champions Club to go see Jaybird. That's what happened, okay? At least keep some of that in-house. You may not want to go watch the third quarter, but at least keep that revenue down the hall outside the seated area. I like how forward-thinking he is. And he put it into action at UNO. Creighton does it for hoops and their athletic events. Nebraska just needs to get moving forward, and I think the Regents will take a step forward for sure with it for basketball.
And amenities are great with the football stadium. I think a couple things that almost we're guaranteed to see are probably some more escalators in the stadium, getting people to and from their seats a little bit more efficiently. That'll be big. Alcohol sales is up there. Maybe some personal seat warmers. That'd be cool for those cold weather November games. But like the main thing for me, if you want to save the sellout streak, lower the damn ticket prices. Like, that's the easiest way to get me in the seats. Like, I'm not going to spend $55 for a seat up in the nosebleeds to go watch Nebraska lose probably to Indiana or to play a competitive game with Indiana. Like, I'll pay $25. I'll pay $30. That's the easiest, like, short-term fix for me. And I know that's not a long-term fix for the university because it's all about the dollars and cents, and they're going to try to squeeze every single dollar out of every single home game that they can. But, like, short-term, you want to sell seats to Indiana? You want to sell seats for some of those later games for a Nebraska team that's probably going to be pretty far sub 500? Lower the ticket prices. I'll go.
Here, you know what used to happen? I was talking to a buddy of mine that went to KU, and he's like, they made us. They made us, whether we went or not, buy football tickets at KU back in the day if we wanted basketball tickets. You're not at that spot for sure for Nebraska. But I'd be okay if they want to lower the ticket price for football, fine, just so you know you get a winning season or we need to pay for this new coach or a buyout or a dream team staff. We're talking $1 million plus coordinators, okay? SEC, you got $100 million of Big Ten money coming in. Just know that your pricing can jump. We'll lower it during the lean years. But we're gonna punch you in the face when we're good. All right. Would you be okay with that?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna expect to pay more for a good, like if I'm going on StubHub, I'm gonna pay more anyway.
Sure. We'll wind down this first hour. We'll get to some of your emails. Gary Barnett on some of the coaches. Hail Varsity continues, presented by Currency.
And now back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Hail Varsity, we're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. As Troy throws out Stoops from Kentucky, he likes Fickle. Titan Jeff responds to Troy on Twitter. He's hoping that the Kansas-Iowa State game in 2 weeks isn't for the Nebraska job. Some emails to get to. This is a fair question from Dalton. Dalton writes in, chris@hailvarsity.com. Really enjoyed the show. Dalton, thanks for listening. One stat I'd like to look into with the new coaches is their record against the spread. How good are they at motivating their players to do better than expected? That's always a telling sign. Can you go in with less and take down a favorite, right? And not just are they great at covering, do they win outright? It's can you go upset somebody, right? That's a telltale sign of a really elite coach. And I'm not sold on Matt Campbell simply because of his record against Iowa. Don't give me that quote of he will do better with Nebraska resources because I heard that with Riley. Yeah, that's what we thought with Riley, right? If he had better in Lincoln than he did in Corvallis, he'd be better. That was the thought, and it didn't work. it was the guy's a 500 coach, and he was right around 500 in Lincoln with a couple of seasons. He underachieved at a couple of years, and he had a 9-win season one year.
But like, I see where this email is coming from, but also let's look recently in Husker history. Last season, Nebraska pretty dang good against the spread, but I don't think that meant that last year's team was like, yeah, Scott Frost is a great coach. Look how awesome he was against the spread last season. Like, don't get me wrong, I see where this email is coming from. But let's look at wins and losses first before we look at wins and losses against the spread. If you've gone out there and you've covered a 14-point spread and you won by 21, that's a completely different thing than if you've covered a 6.5-point spread and lost by 3. Two completely different things. And, like, sure, that's a good result if you're a bettor, but it's not a good result for a football team to go lose by 3 points.
I think, like, just using an example of Leipold, for him to go in year one with all the 5 stars Texas had, to go win in Lawrence with that, or make that win in Austin with that was nuts. That was crazy, right? To go win at West Virginia in year 2 this early in the season. You're dogged by 14. Vegas isn't stupid. To go win outright like you did, super impressive. Those are a couple examples with Sir Lance down in Lawrence. Chad emails in. Here's the 3 legit coaches I have: Sean Payton, Matt Campbell, Lance Leipold. I think Sean Payton's really incredible. I think he's an NFL guy.
Well, and I've seen people throwing out a couple different NFL names in terms of guys that could come down. Like Eric Bieniemy is a name I've seen pretty popular over the past couple days.
We'll talk to Barney about Bieniemy here in about 10 minutes. I promise you.
I'm not sure I understand the appeal with getting an NFL guy, a guy that doesn't know how to coach in college, how to be a head coach in college. Like, Bieniemy's never been a head coach like in the NFL.
He's been a coordinator. He's been a recruiter. He's been at Colorado. He's been at UCLA. It's been a long time. The thing about the NFL guys, Elijah, we'll get to your email here next hour, is Bill Callahan had a brilliant eye for talent. Sue was obvious. Roy Halou, Prince Amukamara, Bill Bush. They could project. They could see and project. And a lot of NFL guys do that and kill it. Sherman at A&M. Look at all the first rounders. Hour 2 coming up. Gary Barnett with us.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Back into it at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. College football thoughts with the Hall of Fame coach Gary Barnett with us. Coach, a lot going on with college football, but also a perfect time of year as we get deeper into September for fall golf. I mean, that's on my radar this weekend, and you play every day, bud. How are you?
I'm well. It's a little chilly today, but I'm probably still find my way over those 84 steps to the golf course and see if I can find a few buds that still want to go out and play.
All right. What is your top draft pick for fall courses? I mean, you've been a lot of different spots.
Yeah.
Where do you love this time of year? What are you going to buy?
2 places that jump out to truthfully 3 places. One is either there in Nebraska. Sand Hills, Dismal River, Wild Horse, that whole Prairie Club, that group up in there makes an easy, nice trip for us from Colorado. And then I did Pinehurst in the fall 4 or 5 years ago, and that was a great, great trip. It's pricey, but it's really fun down there. And then I went to Big Cedar Lodge last year and played the 5 courses there in the fall, and that was a spectacular trip as well. The leaves weren't turning yet, but when we were there, but it was still just really. It was October, 1st of October, and it was just perfect weather.
You ever been Big Sky? I mean, I know you're in the mountains now, so I don't know what. Have you ever thought of doing that, or is it kind of the same scenery?
Well, no, it's all different, I think. But I haven't done that one. No, I've just pretty much. I did do the Robert Trent Jones Trail in Alabama, and that was spectacular. That was an inexpensive trip because those courses, they're public and they're I think it costs you $45, and you go in there in Auburn and you play. There's 2 courses there at Auburn and a par 3 that's spectacular, really good, probably the best I've ever played. And then you can pick out of 21 other courses to go to. We finished at, actually it was not on the Trent Jones Trail, but the Alabama, or Birmingham Country Club, which is the pro there's a Nebraska guy, and he was very congenial. Didn't charge me. And so that golf course is really good.
Look at that, Husker hospitality. I love it for Coach Gary Barnett. Let's talk Nebraska. What's Mickey facing here, Coach? Just a tough one against OU. They look incredible. Give me your takeaway from the OU game. And, of course, Nebraska promoting Bill Bush to defensive coordinator as Coach Chenander, we all love him, was released. What's this climb look like for the Big Red?
Well, any time you change at this point in time, you're not likely to see a lot of change. A good defensive team when you haven't been. That just doesn't happen. What you're trying to do is not have anything like you had last Saturday. You're just trying to avoid that kind of thing as much as you can. Players have to. You want players to sort of demonstrate the fact that that the change is worthwhile, that they're getting a little bit better. Mickey's, as he's learning the jump from, in his case, the jump from being just the receivers coach to the head coach, that's not just 1 or 2 steps. That's huge. Now, hopefully he's got a lot of people there helping him with all the administrative stuff, and he can just pretty much handle the football but piece of it. Things don't change much. I don't know how much of Mickey's philosophy is going to, fall into Mark Whipple. How much of it is going to be, a clash? How much of it is going to be, where they're on the same page? It's just so hard to tell. I don't know. But Mickey's head swimming, he more than anything, because he played there and he understands and he gets it, is you don't make a change when you made it without expecting something to happen. He's under a lot of pressure, personal pressure, to just make things better somewhere, somehow that's visible, and leave his mark when he leaves, and hope he gets a chance to interview, but you just try to make things better while you're there.
What's your take on Bill Bush?
He's got a lot of experience. That piece of it, I think, probably is good for the players, understanding that he brings a lot of experience from a lot of good programs, knows what it should look like. He's just got to get his credibility across to the players, and then they have to believe in him. And when he says, this is what a good defense looks like, these are the numbers a good defense should have, or a better defense. He's thrust into a tough situation as well. These guys all, a lot of guys on defense came there either because of the coordinator or maybe because the coach for us, but lots of times they come for the coordinator, and now that guy's out. The whole system that they've been using for 5 years, 4.5 years is gone. So Bill can't change any of the system. You just can't change it in the middle. But every position coach watches things unfold as the day goes on, the week goes on, the year goes on, and he's got his idea what it should look like. Mm-hmm. So now he's got a chance now to impose his ideas on this defense, and where he may have disagreed with the former coordinator, now he can try to put his ideas in place. And of course he's going to need buy-in from the other coaches, because it's still a team game in that coaching room as well.
Gary Barnett with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, what do you look or see in the West? Is it still possible for Nebraska to make a run in the West, or do you think this season's lost because of all the change? I ask that because the West is really, no one's really stood out so far this early part of the year?
Well, I would disagree with you and tell you that Minnesota stands out. Going back and forth with Jerry DiNardo and his view on it and the Big Ten Network, he certainly thinks Minnesota is the team to beat in that side. And I, after seeing them up close and personal, I agree. They're a well-oiled machine. Now, they lost their best receiver, and if you can stop the run against Minnesota, they may not be able to beat you in the air, but it's hard stopping that run, I'm telling you, because that line is good and those running backs are good and the quarterback's smart. So to me, Minnesota's the team that you have to beat there, and they are leaps and bounds ahead of everybody. They hadn't played anybody, but I'm including us when I say that, but they're still good. They're a really good football team. And, Iowa and Wisconsin both look like they're just, stumbling around. Northwestern certainly is just stumbling around. So, yeah, you're not out of it. You haven't played a game in the West other than Northwestern. So, yeah, it's all still out there. It's just whether you're going to go play or not.
Coach, a thought, Dave Aranda, there's a lot of names floating around for Nebraska. What's your view of the Baylor job? Has it elevated? Is it a tough place to maybe pull a candidate from? Or is there a lot of happy down in Waco with resources in the talent in the region?
Well, have you ever been to Waco? I've
driven through it.
Baylor?
Didn't stop.
Okay, but you haven't been to Baylor. You haven't been on the campus.
No.
So it's really a really nice school. It's a really good school, and people go there really like Baylor. It's like TCU. Okay. Students who go there really like it there. That's what you got. You go to Baylor for a reason. One, it's sort of a leaning Baptist, and it's in the South, and it's in Waco, and it's in Texas. That whole Texas vibe people like, and they don't want to leave it. For the students. Now, as far as coaching goes, when people have asked me why college coaches don't make it in the NFL, I always say, well, it's because you lose all your control. In college, you have complete control. Players, coaches, etc. And the coaches pretty much run the college teams. But when you go to the NFL, then you lose all that control. Players run it, this and that. So the guys who've tried to make it urban, even Nick, Lou Holtz, you can go right down the list, Spurrier, the really successful coaches at top-notch places who've always had everything they've ever needed, and they've been in control. Inherently, they've had advantages. When you go to the NFL, you don't have an advantage. Now, I'm telling you this because I'm leading up to the most interesting guy I want to watch and see if he makes it is Matt Rule, who went to the NFL from Baylor. He didn't have all the advantage. He didn't have inherent recruiting advantage other than he's in Texas, and that is an advantage. But he didn't have the same advantage as all these other guys have. So if he goes to the NFL and makes it, then my whole story changes a little bit. Now, he's struggling to make it, no question about it. So he may fall down that rabbit hole as well. So Baylor is a place that I don't think you think of as having everything.
Gotcha.
You've got to be really happy with Baylor and want to live there. Otherwise, there are a lot of places that are better, at least on paper. Maybe not realistically. Matt Aranda, I started doing a book on halftime adjustments. I went into 8 different programs, halftime talks, and halftime discussions. The most impressed I was of the 8 teams I went into Wisconsin when Aranda was the coordinator. That was the most impressive halftime adjustment session and halftime arrangement and demeanor by a coach of all the guys I went to, and I went to some really good ones, as you would think is really good. So I have a lot of respect for Aranda, for Dave, and for what he did and what he did at all the places he's been, but what he's done at Baylor, and just the way he thinks. He's a pretty creative guy.
Gary Barnett with us, Hail Varsity Radio. There's been some names that have been floating around here the last week since we talked, and Urban was in Lincoln and got the love and adoration, and sounds like per Urban's podcast, he's pretty happy where he's at right now, and Leipold also, and Campbell. I mean, those are constant names. Bill O'Brien, Coach Barnett. I mean, he's done a great job down working for Nick, and I think O'Brien's also a name there. A name that's been floated out, and you know him, and maybe it's just a conversation that's there to pick a brain type deal, but Eric Bieniemy. I mean, Bieniemy's next move would be NFL head job, not back to college. Is that a fair take?
Well, that's what I would think, and that's what I would, if I were in a room with Eric, that would be my advice.
Right.
But, and it has been my advice on other situations. But, things change, people change. You get you want your own ranch. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know where Eric is on that. And so it's a major change to go from where he is to really any college job. It's a major change, would be a major change for him. And as I would say to him, be careful what you wish for here, because you're coaching the best quarterback in the NFL, maybe in the last 8 years. You've got a really good football team. You're going to win almost every game. You don't recruit. You don't have NIL. You don't have this and that. You don't have the transfer portal. You got rules. Everybody's got the same. You don't have any inherent advantages or disadvantages in the NFL. There's just, to me, so many reasons to stay in the NFL if you could. But you do get an itch, and everybody gets it, and so if he wants his own ranch, then maybe he needs to make that move. I don't know.
Gary Barnett, Coach, some rapid fire. Upset of the weekend: Florida, Tennessee, Baylor, Iowa State, Clemson, Wake. What do you think?
Iowa State's favored by 2.5, so I don't know if that's an upset. That looks pretty even to me. It's being played there. I don't see that much of an upset. If there was one that I'd pick that could happen, it would be that one. That quarterback gets hot again. Yeah. But I like Tennessee a lot. Clemson, nobody's excited about Clemson. I think they're getting better. If they ever play that backup quarterback, it's lights out for them. So the upset I'd have to pick would be Baylor, Iowa State.
Okay.
If you're going to force me to take of the ones that could happen, that's the one most likely to happen.
What about Kansas State at Oklahoma? minus 12.5 Sooners.
I don't see an upset. I don't see an upset coming there.
What do you think of Washington and Kalen? They're looking good. They got Stanford coming in.
Listen, that's a good football team. And
yeah, it is.
Penix has got new life. And that is a good-looking team, and they've always had players. I'll tell you that. So, now Stanford will probably put points on them, but they can't stop anybody. And so I think Washington still wins that game.
And we'll wrap with UCLA heading into Boulder. Chips
we're
coming to town.
We're 21.5-point dogs, and unless the plane lands and it's 48 degrees and those guys get back on the plane, I imagine it's going to be a tough day for us.
Gary Barnett with us. Coach, you have a good weekend and hit him far and straight. Thanks for a few minutes.
Talk to you later, Chris. Thanks.
Good stuff with Coach Gary Barnett. Some thoughts there on the Bieniemy name you saw out there on Twitter, and pretty good great perspective on Baylor. Well, there's money and talent down there. Do you want to stay in Baylor forever? Not necessarily, was kind of my read on it. What's Bill Bender say? Sporting News. His thoughts next on Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
More football this Thursday. It's Hail Varsity Radio, and Bill Bender joins us from the Sporting News at Bill Bender 92. Bill, a lot going on in Lincoln as it's been constant change. Mickey Joseph, your interim head coach, Nebraska's defensive coordinator, let go. What's your take here so far through the first several weeks of 2022 for Nebraska football?
To lose that game the way that they did, obviously the onside kick, and then bottom out against Georgia Southern. And, you know it's bad. You know the situation's toxic when they opted to fire him instead of waiting on the buyout money. All of this you've already probably heard. So to me, it's really about talking about what's next. So, there's some names, and I've been telling people this all along. Chris, Kansas State, Baylor, Iowa State. Mm-hmm. Tom Osborne went 75-3 against those schools. But I think Nebraska should look at those places for its next head coach.
Bill, don't disagree. Those have been names we've been hearing all week. Some bigger names, or at least proven NFL college level for Bill O'Brien. And then, of course, the Urban fascination. I want to get your reaction to Bill O'Brien in Lincoln and also Urban Meyer in Lincoln. What goes through your mind when you hear those two names? I love your 4 schools, and I'm in on you with it, but I got to ask the bigger fish question first.
Oh, you always do. You always have to ask that, right? Okay, let's start with Bill O'Brien. I mean, by all accounts, he'll probably be a pretty solid coach when he takes the next job because he's gone through the Saban clinic. And, I think he'd be fine in Lincoln. But what is fine? Urban, obviously, if you hire him, you're going to win. You hire him, you have to explain all the baggage, and all those kind of things. And the one thing I said about Urban Meyer, the common thread between his exits and his comebacks is he took a break, he goes to the studio, and then all of a sudden he comes back and he's still the same awesome college football coach. So, there's a reason they were chanting his name because he has the 3rd highest winning percentage of all time behind Newt Rockne and Frank Leahy. Is your fan base willing to do that to win football games? That's the big question. And most would say, yeah.
Bill Bender's with us here on Hail Varsity from the Sporting News. Bill, a thought on Lance Leipold from Kansas. Is it the hot current name, or is it the Nebraska tie? What's your take on the work Lance has done, not only recently, but his body from a fit and get standpoint? What are the possibilities for that movement?
Yeah, he's obviously off to a great start this season, and there's a proven track record of winning. He's made Kansas football exciting this year, at least off to the 3-0 start. They're scoring a bunch of points. He obviously knows how to establish a culture. I think he'd fit well. There'd be some Nebraska fans that'd be like, what are we doing hiring a Kansas coach? But, he can win, and I think he would do more at Nebraska than he can do at Kansas, obviously, with the resources available and those kind of things. So he's just not a name you can dismiss. And the more he wins this season, the more that's going to become apparent, because I think Kansas is at least good for a bowl game. I don't know if they're good for a 12-1 season, but they're good for a bowl game.
12-1 would be Mangino-like, right? Who forgets the Orange Bowl? Nobody down in Lawrence. You mentioned some schools. You mentioned Baylor. You mentioned Iowa State. Of course, Aranda and Campbell. We've touched on Leipold. And if you were to rank them, Bill Bender, if Trev Alberts is on the phone with you after we get done talking, give me your order.
I would say Campbell would be my first one. I like him the most out of those guys. I just think what he's done at Ames over not just like 1 year has been amazing. They're a winning team every year. They've been to a Fiesta Bowl. They've played the Big 12 championship. They've developed NFL talent, guys like Breece Hall and Charlie Kohler and Mike McDonald, and that's what you strive to do. I like Aranda. I don't know that he's going to leave Baylor, though. I think he fits well there, although he does have the Big Ten tie from coaching at Wisconsin, knows how to win, really good mind, good coach. And then Kleeman at Kansas State's interesting to me, but I'd have him maybe a rung down from those two. Mm-hmm. And I think, unfortunately, the best coach is probably Mark Stoops, but he's not leaving Kentucky. He is everything Nebraska should want in a coach. A guy that can do all the things that he's been able to do in Lexington, I think he can do in Lincoln.
Bill Bender with his Sporting News, Hail Varsity Radio, talking Cornhusker coaching carousel. And so let's talk some under-the-radar names. Those are some names that make sense and have performed in areas that you don't recruit or don't have a recruiting base, comparatively speaking. What about Smith out of Oregon State? That's a name that Joel Klatt threw out a couple of days ago. Do you like, and Nebraska fans may cringe about the Oregon State reference, but Smith's been really pretty good, and I like DeBoer. What do you think of him at Washington? He's not far away originally from Sioux Falls. He was really good, I think, early in his career, not far away from Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean, DeBoer's off to a heck of a start at Washington, too, and he did well at Fresno State. I think he would be a name that you could absolutely consider. Smith has taken a little bit longer time to get it going at Oregon State, but he does have it going. They're playing very well. Off to a good start. Have a chance to play USC this weekend. Those are, again, program builders. And this is the theme of this conversation, Chris, is this is probably where it's going to lead, because as much as you want that rock star coach like Urban Meyer, it's these names that Trev Alberts is going to have to sift through to find that next guy. And I firmly believe that's what's going to happen.
Few minutes, Bill Bender with us, Hail Varsity Radio Sporting News at Bill Bender92 on Twitter's where you follow him. Bill, you had a great write-up on the coaching cycle earlier in the week with the Sporting News, and I encourage listeners to read that. And your after-the-fact 2018 coaching cycle, some guys thrived, but many did not. And, man, that was supposed to be the year. That was the year of resurrection for a number of programs. And Bill, a number of schools, including Nebraska, onto another coach already since that 2018 cycle.
Yeah, it's wild that 10 of the 13 Power 5 hires are no longer with that school. And I remember, I mean, we talked. I've talked to you long enough that we talked about Scott Frost being a home run and Chip Kelly being a home run, and Jimbo's going to push Nebraska or Texas A&M into a new age and all of those things, and none of those things happened. So it's really crazy, and I still believe, and I say this all the time, but we live in an age where it doesn't happen. I still think you need to give a coach 5 years to figure it out. So yeah, it's all of those things that we'll see as they go on, but. You know, I think the best success story of those guys is probably Mario Cristobal.
Agree. And he made Oregon tough and physical and really talented on the lines. And do you expect him to follow suit back home at Miami? I mean, Cristobal's a guy that he's had to endure a firing. And then he went and was part of Saban's staff. He was part of Saban's original kind of rock star staff, and then he found his own footing at Oregon. And can Miami be brought back to what the U used to be? I mean, he played for a title and won one down there.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how he does. Mario Cristobal's definitely a guy that he's ahead of the game in NIL. He's ahead of the game in terms of player development. I think he's recruiting well since the Nick Saban deal at Alabama when he was again in that clinic. And I think they're a team that definitely better. But what I was surprised with is whether they went to Texas A&M last week and it was sloppy. You know, dropped passes, dropped punts, dropped a lot of mistakes. And it's one of those deals where I think he's going to need time, and with Miami need patience. And I think their thing is they have to build toward winning an ACC championship.
Bill Bender with us. Bill, going to get you out on this. Impressions through 2 weeks on the NFL. Are you panicking with Cincinnati yet?
No, because the NFL, I mean, anything can happen. If I was panicked about them, I would say they need to protect their investment. Joe Burrow's taken entirely too many sacks. He's taken 13 sacks so far. The end of the Pittsburgh game was wild. But I think even in those two games, he was able to bring them back and make the plays in the fourth quarter to tie the football game. So I'm not as worried about the Bengals. I think the NFL has proven just a wild product, man. Miami's 2-0, wild comeback. There's a lot of but I do think what we're doing in the NFL, and it's early to say this, it looks right now like Buffalo and everyone else.
No, it does. Do you think Miami can keep that magic going? I know they got the Bills this weekend.
Yeah, we'll find out. I mean, they're certainly exciting with Mike McDaniel. They're not afraid to throw the football down the field with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. But, it's going to be an exciting game. So Buffalo coming off a short week, Miami throwing it around the way they do. I think it'll be a fun game.
Bill Bender with us. Find him at BillBender92. Sporting news, college football, NFL, all your pigskin this fall. Bill, thanks for giving us time. We'll check in again soon, bud. Have a good weekend.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Good to find time with Bill Bender at BillBender92 on Twitter and go through some of the names with the Cornhusker coaching carousel. Reminder to get buckled up, hands on the wheel, eyes in mind, straight ahead. The driver has one job to do. That's drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. We'll get some best bets going here with Danny Burke from VSiN Sports Network. And Matt's email we wanted to get to. He says, not that my opinion is right or overly important, but I have a few thoughts. Matt says, I don't want to run down Campbell, Aranda, or Leipold, but I think we can all agree that the Big Ten's much tougher than people want to admit compared to the Big 12, and the Big 12's not near as tough as the prior 2010 realignment. They are good, but much closer to the Pac-12. As far as Campbell goes, I think Frost Riley would have had a similar record to his if Nebraska was still in the Big 12. When it comes to Aranda, I think he's a good coach, but he hasn't been a head coach for any longer than Frost when we hired him. Leipold, maybe a slam dunk, but can we really take a chance on a coach that's currently 42-43 and 5-10 in his first 15 in the Big 12? So that's the question. Does it translate to the Big 10? We'll see where things go. VSiN's Danny Burke next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it at Hail Varsity, and we say hi to Danny Burke, Burke's Best Bets, VSiN Sports Network. And you can find Danny on Twitter at DannyBurke5. Pride of Chicago with us. Any bad beats? Any tears last weekend with the NFL? Danny, thanks for the time.
Yeah, my tears were on the side of the Cleveland Browns blowing that game. That's probably where I was the most tearful. But you know what? It actually didn't end up terrible. Just in the moment it was bad because I had them in a teaser along with the Vikings, and the Vikings got blown out. So it wouldn't end up mattering at the end of the day. But, geez, that was painful for a lot of people. The other one that I was kind of Hackett being a literal hack and Russell Wilson staying under his passing yards prop, that kind of stunk. Yeah, Elijah, your head coach is a nightmare.
Tell me about it.
And then the over not going for the Eagles and Vikings with like 6 opportunities that could have been cashed in. Those were the most infuriating things that happened to me in week 2.
Man, there were some bad beats. Let's start off with Tampa and Green Bay. Who's Tom Brady going to throw to? Bucks at home -1 against Aaron Rodgers.
So this line was as high as 3.5, and you've just seen it keep dropping and dropping and dropping, and you can even get it at a pick-em at some spots. So a lot of love coming in on the side of Aaron Rodgers. Look, I get that the Bears were inevitably the team to get them back in the rhythm of things, but the Bears were, a millimeter away from covering that game and maybe having a different conversation of how we view this matchup against Tampa. Let's also not forget that Aaron Rodgers really struggled in 2 states. It's California and it's Florida. When the Saints got to choose where they wanted to host them last year, they literally picked Jacksonville because they knew that he struggled there. And he's like, it doesn't bother me. Well, you went out there and they got stopped. And the last 2 times they've played Tampa Bay in the postseason and at Tampa Bay, Aaron Rodgers has fallen victim to Tom Brady. Now, yes, I understand Mike Evans is suspended. Godwin's banged up. You have some other receivers like Julio Jones that's banged up. But the big difference here is the defense. Tampa Bay, without a doubt, has the most dominant defense in the NFL. And Aaron Rodgers, you're going to trust Sammy Watkins against his Buccaneers defense? You can get away with that against the Bears. You can't get away with that against Tampa Bay. All right, then we'll give it to A.J. Dillon and then Aaron Jones. Well, yeah, but the yards per carry are probably going to be less than 3.5 because, again, how great this defense is. it's probably going to be a really lower scoring game. The total was as high as 48. Now it's down to 42. I would consider the under, but ultimately at the end of the day, I just bet Bucs money line because I think this line is crashing way too much, and you can't put stock in Aaron Rodgers in these spots. Just because they beat a bad Bears team doesn't mean they can hang with Tom Brady and the best defense in the NFL. So give me Tampa on the money line.
Danny Burke is with us here. Burke's Best Bets on Hail Varsity Radio. Check out Danny Burke on the VSiN Sports Network. And Danny, that's $3.25. Let's back it up a little bit and go to the noon slot in a game that's really intriguing to me. I think it might be the game of the weekend. Is Bills and Dolphins. The Bills 5.5-point favorites on the road against a team in the Dolphins that may have gained themselves a lot of early season momentum after that comeback last week against the Ravens. But the Bills right now look like they're the best team in football. 5.5 though. It's a big line. Well, what do you like in that game?
Yeah, it's really in an awkward spot laying 5.5. If you wanted to do something with Buffalo, I'd probably look to tease them down if you're getting a 6 offered to you. So then you just tease them down from 6 all the way to a pick 'em, so then Buffalo just needs to win the game outright. I do think they're far and beyond pretty much every other team in the NFL, and on paper they should be better than the Dolphins. And I'm I don't want to say I'm just pretty much not ready to accept that the Dolphins are as good as they've looked. The Ravens' secondary is trash, and a lot of those plays, it was just broken coverage where Tyreek or Jalen Waddle were wide open. Let's see an actual secondary go up against this Dolphins offense. This is going to be the first real challenge, in terms of a team. I guess you could argue Baltimore, but for Mike McDaniel, this is an incredibly tough spot here. Just like it was for Kevin O'Connell on primetime Monday night against the Eagles, I could see something similar happening with the Bills and the Dolphins. I think the Buffalo Bills win this game. I don't want to lay the spread. I'll probably stay away. And you know what? If the Dolphins keep it close or get an early lead, like I say a lot here on the show and many other shows, I'll wait to in-game bet it because I just don't really like that number. The total is intriguing as well. If there's any slow point in the game, I'd probably look to in-game bet the total going over, assuming you'll see more fireworks in the second half if it gets off to a slower start.
Danny, before we get to some college football, I want you to take us through Thursday night football tonight. We got the Steelers going to Cleveland, taking on the Browns. The Browns are a 4-point favorite, and my read on this is it's back to good old Thursday night football, another unappealing matchup for our eyes on a Thursday night, but I'll be watching anyway because it's NFL. What do you like tonight between the Steelers and the Browns?
Oh, yeah, the vintage ugly AFC North matchup in a game that's going to be featuring very high winds. So you're probably going to be seeing a lot of groundwork. And you'd see that regardless, at least on the side of Cleveland, with the duo of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and Brissett just not being the most, dominant quarterback on the offensive side of the ball. And conversely for the Steelers, well, you got Mitch Trubisky. You don't want to have to trust him, but that's the state of Pittsburgh football right now. I think this is a better spot for Cleveland. Not that I'm doing anything with the full game, but I'm actually looking at the first half for the Browns on the money line. Cleveland's going to be coming into this game just absolutely ticked off with the way that they lost against the Jets. 99 times out of 100, that's not going to happen. Probably even more so than that. And somehow they let it happen. So their defense is going to be irate. They get a short week to go out there, get right back on the field, and prove in a primetime spot that they're not as bad as they look. They're not as vulnerable as they looked against Joe Flacco. Right? And the Steelers' defense against the ground game, they've really been poor thus far, still missing T.J. Watt. I think Chubb, I think Hunt will have a great game in these weather conditions, unlike Trubisky, who already has accuracy problems. So I like the Browns to get off to a hot start. You could lay it about 2.5 under the key number of 3, but because of how windy it was, I'm not really trusting these extra points and these kickers. And you get the security of if it ties, I get my money back. So I did lay minus $1.70. You may be even able to get a cheaper price at this point. But my bet was Browns on the first half money line tonight.
Did a Big Ten matchups, Ohio State minus 19 hosting Wisconsin, night game in Columbus. Also the Fighting Flex minus 3 against Sparty on the road.
Yeah, with Ohio State and Wisconsin, there's actually some 18s available when I was looking at it earlier today. So I laid the 18 with Ohio State. Honestly, there's not much to this handicap aside from my preconceived thoughts with Wisconsin heading into the season and how great Ohio State looked. I took Wisconsin under 9 wins, and I'm still feeling great about it after they lost to Washington State. Look, Graham Mertz and the offense put up 66 last week. Who cares? Now you're actually playing against a legit team. Ohio State averaging almost 50 points per game. you could argue, the one tough game they played, Notre Dame, they only dropped 21. Well, that was the first game of the season. Now Ohio State's got some rhythm. They got a Big Ten opponent coming to their house. They're going to show Wisconsin why they're the little brother in this game. It'll be Ohio State all the way, and Graham Mertz will be very, very much struggling to keep up in that spot. And then for Minnesota and Michigan State, guys, I didn't bet this game yet, but there has been some strong line movement going to the side of Minnesota. I know they lost their top receiver, but offensively they still got their ground game, which is the advantage. They're going to be able to consistently move the rock. This team's averaging 50 points per game at this point. I feel like in the trenches, Michigan State is really going to struggle. And as soon as Minnesota gets out to that early lead, the Spartans are really going to have a tough time trying to play keep up. So I do have the lean to Minnesota in this game. I'm not going to bet it because I am a little bit scared about the injuries. I want to see how they scheme around it. But I do think they should be able to take care of business in East Lansing.
Danny Burke, VSiN Sports Network, at Danny Burke 5 on Twitter. Danny, thanks for the time today.
Hey, you bet, fellas. Take care.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at HailVarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time on a Thursday, it's Hail Varsity. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Get the podcast if you want. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Give us a rating, good, bad, ugly. We'll take the feedback and appreciate it. Also, the show posted on Hail Varsity's YouTube channel. You can see my smiling face and Elijah Herbel. Numbers to get in, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. And tomorrow, Road Show Friday, we are at the Hail Varsity Club in La Vista, right between Cabela's and Embassy Suites on Giles. So come see us up there, get a beer and a burger before you head off to high school football action in the Metro. Tonight, locally here in Lincoln, we'll have high school football coverage over on sister station KFOR, Millard North and Southeast. Two big-time giants will touch gloves. Did you ever square off against Millard North?
JV. We had a JV game against Millard North, and if I remember correctly, we dropped that game in a close one. I think it was our only JV loss that season, if I remember correctly. But it's also kind of hard, whenever you're on the bench for a Friday night game, the bus doesn't get back till like 10:45, 11. You're not in bed till 1, and then boom, you got to wake up. It's an 8 a.m. JV game the next morning. Those really didn't mean anything. I wasn't a huge fan of JV football personally, but I think we ended up losing that game in a tight one.
Well, going to be some option football tonight, man.
God love the option football.
Petito does an amazing job. Southeast really good, though. And, back in the day, the Nebraska football team had the Wee-backs, Calvin Jones, Derek Brown. They were fantastic. Southeast has the Butin backs. You have Max and Cash that are really, really talented. Good ball players. Man, they're fun. So we'll be doing that tonight around 8 o'clock. Looking out my kitchen window here. A little bit of rain in South Lincoln. So it's going to be roll up your sleeves. Well, no sleeves. Football weather tonight. A little ground and pound. We'll have that again on KFOR locally here in Lincoln. A big thanks to Gary Barnett and Bill Bender today. Awesome to catch up with Brandon Vogel and get your best bets with VSiN's Danny Burke and some NFL. Do you feel like a steak and a beer bet tonight, or do you want to wait till tomorrow and pick a different NFL or college football matchup?
I thought you were talking about Millard North and Southeast. I was like, what's the line?
No, I don't know where there is the Twitter handle. There is the Twitter handle that does put odds out for high school action. I have not dove into that realm of hell yet. I will never bet high school because I love doing high school action. So no, not me. I'm not Pete Rose, right? But the high school guy who does the games for a few years, and he's a Pete Rose of Lincoln. Can't hit.
Well, the thing
on
is,
the sheet or in the batter's box.
From covering high school football, guys like you and Motzi probably got the best insight on what's going to happen in these games. That's all I'm saying. You could make a killing.
It's take care of the football and field position. You and I both know that.
This is true.
All right, tomorrow, come see us in La Vista at the Hale Varsity Club, 4 to 6. Good stuff from Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, and we'll talk to you with Hale Varsity, presented by Currency.